Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two, and homemaker. Come along with me as I share my love for simple living, growing in my allotment garden, diving into what it means to be an urban homesteader, and embracing life as a mother and homemaker. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm super excited today. I know I say it every time. I know I do. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try and stop. I'm super excited every time, but I really am. Listen, something about me is that I adore this podcast. I love being able to make it. I love being able to speak to some absolutely incredible people. I know I say it a lot, but I'm so lucky. Sometimes I have, weeks where I do a lot of podcast recording. At the moment, I'm on a bit of a scaled back schedule, but sometimes I'm recording consistently over a few nights, and it doesn't matter whether it's when I'm busy or when I am less busy. I always thoroughly enjoy the conversations, and I always feel so renewed when I've had a conversation with you guys. So it is absolutely incredible. But actually, before I go on, maybe I should drop something in here saying that if you would like to be on this podcast, then get in touch with me, because I absolutely am open to talking about all kinds of different topics. So if you would like to join me on this podcast, I promise you it's not as scary as it sounds. All of my guests are always like, I'm nervous, and I completely get that, because it is nerve-wracking going on a podcast. I went on a podcast for the first time in the pandemic, and I remember being like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm going to sound so ridiculous. And I promise you guys that it is a completely laid back conversation. It's intending to be fun and just two people having a chat. So if you would like to join me here on this podcast, then send me an email. You can email me at hello@amypigott.co.uk. Amy Pigott is spelled Pigott. So hello@amypigott.co.uk, and just drop me a message, or drop me a message on Instagram. You can find me there at Life on Plot 44. Send me a message somewhere and we will get it scheduled. Okay, so for today's episode, I'm really excited. Like I said, I am talking to Kirsty from Heart, Homestead and Homestead, and we are talking about urban homesteading. Honestly, one of my favourite topics. I absolutely love urban homesteading. So let's just jump straight into it, and me and Kirsty will explain everything you need to know about urban homesteading. Hi, Kirsty. Thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast episode. Before we dive in, do you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, hello, thank you for having me. I'm Kirsty. I'm a married mum of three, and I love cups of tea, nature, and uncomplicated living.
Ah, that sounds wonderful. So today we're going to talk about urban homesteading and how you can absolutely employ some of the techniques of a homesteader in maybe a more urban environment, and how it might even be the best choice for some people's circumstances. So what inspired you to pursue urban homesteading, and how has it transformed your life?
Well, as with a lot of people, I used to be one of them people that worked full time, took work home. I was at uni 2 nights a week. I did the mum guilt thing, and on a Saturday, I used to spend too much money, entertaining the children, taking them places. And then my body burnt out. I got ill, ended up with a little hospital stay. And when I was in recovery, we did things like baking and just spending that time together and doing bits in the garden and things. And it just made me realise that I didn't want to rush about anymore, and I wanted to just slow down and make our own things and just enjoy each other.
Yeah, I think lots of people are sort of slowly coming to this idea that I don't know, we've been sold a bit of a lie, haven't we? Where it's like we need to be busy all the time, and being busy equals being productive. And I just don't necessarily think that that's the case. Yes, there are elements of life that can get a bit busy, but it's ultimately, when we slow down, we're able to sort of appreciate things. a little more.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and so, like, when I first came across the idea of, like, urban homesteading, I guess, I was like, "Oh, like, this is sounds like my life." You know, because I live in, like, a small two-bedroom flat and have a balcony and, just doing those things like making our own food, growing as much as we can, but I live essentially in an urban environment. So, what are some of the practical tips or maybe strategies you have for people that maybe like are living in more of an urban area that, can help them sort of get started with homesteading?
Definitely don't try and do too much at once. If you're learning a lot of skills, it can be hard. So making sourdough, try and just putting lots of seeds in to try and grow your own things, fixing everything yourself. It's really too much to start with, and don't go out and spend a lot of money. It's not about having this beautiful where everything's in these matching jars and everything looks pretty. It's about the making of it and the enjoying the slower paced and enjoying your own crops and things like that. I'd definitely start with reading a lot. Books are great, but you can get a lot from the internet now. Listening, following like-minded people taught me a lot, and finding out that you don't have to have that big garden and lots of livestock and everything to have that homestead lifestyle. So there's plenty of free things to try to start with. So just reducing waste. So if you're peeling potatoes and you've got them potato skins there, or your vegetables, you could make a stock or do some baked potato skins and things like that. So that, and it costs no money, but you're doing something that's reusing an item that would have been a waste product, and you're doing something that it in a way it makes another meal, and it actually saves money in that way. And also things like preserving. So if you buy something and you think, oh, I'm not going to use that, like vegetables that are going a bit limp in the fridge, think, well, if I blanch them for 1 minute in boiling water and put them in the freezer, we can use them again. And it's if you've done that with your own crops, you just get that little bit more satisfaction, and you think, oh, I made that, I've preserved that, and we've learned how to do it, and it's just that you get that lovely feeling inside.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because so many times when I'm talking on these podcasts, I'm talking to different people, and so much always like stems back to the pandemic. And I know it was like a huge part of like all of our lives and stuff, but
Yeah,
like what you just said really reminded me of like when we were like stuck at home at first, and like we had to make like a food shop last for like 2 weeks. And I
yes,
remember just like, feeling like really like getting that feeling that you mentioned about like really being able to like make things last, and giving things, like vegetables that are about to go off, being able to sort of extend their life in some way, like you say, like making a stock or something. And I think that's kind of where, although I was, I guess, trying to slow down before that, I would say that's probably like my little line in the sand that really like made me think like I don't want to go back to normal after all this, like whatever normal was. Um I didn't want to go back to that. And so, like you say, there are so many different things that you can do, like sourdough. You mentioned sourdough, and I think like sometimes sourdough like overwhelms me, and sometimes I can't keep my sourdough starter alive. And I think like these are just normal little things when you're sort of living that little urban homestead life.
yeah, and there is easier way to do it as well. I've got a bread maker, and I use that more than making bread by hand because of the time involved. And I think, well, if I put things in a bread maker, I also do my jam in there. I can use that time to do a bit more gardening. I actually fit more in, but without being stressed over time. So because we are in an urban environment, um, we've got that flexibility. So we can use electric if we need to. We're not completely off the grid, and we have got them time savers, which can really help. But we still have that nice homemade food.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm the same. Like I try and use my bread maker a lot, and more recently as well. Like, so our bread maker is so old. My husband brought it to my life. It lived with him prior to it living with us, and it's so old. All of like the program numbers and everything's like rubbed off. There was like no instructions, and so we pretty much I had to go online and find this bread maker instruction booklet so I could find out like what do all these settings do, because we just like use the first one. And so we've been making dough a lot more recently and then putting it in the oven. And you mentioned jam. Like jam is something that I want to use the bread maker for, because I've been making it like just, you know, on the hob. So yeah, I think you can use some of like these, like more modern conveniences, right? And actually sort of say it saves you time, so you're not having to do all of these things literally by hand.
Yes, I completely agree. And the bread maker for making jam as well, you can make much smaller quantities. So if you have grown your own and you've only got like a small raspberry bush or strawberries, it makes about 2 pots, and that's just perfect. So you don't have to put all your produce into that and make one big batch of jam. It just makes them nice little lovely containers full, and just to enjoy, but then you can still freeze some and you can still have some on your breakfast, and it really does work
I
for
love
us.
that. I'll definitely have to, yeah, make sure that I give it a go. But you also mentioned about, like I think homesteading is like really connected with this idea that you need to have like livestock,
Yeah.
and you need to have like chickens or a dairy cow, and like I'm not having chickens, I have a balcony. There's no way I'm having chickens.
Yeah.
And actually I often I've started saying this a little bit, like, I don't want chickens. I know it's like the ultimate homesteader's dream, but
Yeah.
I don't think I want chickens. I don't wanna be tied to like, being at home all the time. We like to travel a little bit too, and it would be difficult if I had to get chickens looked after. But, you know, a lot of like homesteading is sort of based around this idea of, having livestock. But there are so many different things that you can do I think to get, you can buy eggs like from a local farm and things like that, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and so we have also been, like buying local honey, and we try and buy local produce and like meat locally if we're able.
Yes, we do that too. Since, as you mentioned before, the pandemic, a lot of people do deliver now. So we've got someone from the local market who does £15 boxes of, so he does like a soup mix, a fruit box, a veg box, and it's all in season items. And he delivers them once a week or once a month, however much you want them. So it's great to top up what you're not growing yourself. And it's nice to try little things without going all out and trying to grow them yourself, and you think, oh, I might grow that next time. I did enjoy that. And the same with meat as well. We get ours from a local butcher, and they do deliveries now. So because they get delivered to the house, it's also like we have to unpack them and everything, and there's none of that horrible plastic packaging and things like that. It also reduces waste in that way.
Yeah, we've been we generally order our fruit and veg. We've been getting it from Riverford, just to like fill in the gaps. I could never grow. I have an allotment as well, but I could never grow the amount that is needed to like fully sustain my family. But I just, what I've been trying to do, I think, is like grow as much as I can, but then also, you know, we've been getting the Riverford boxes. We generally will get like just the veg box, or sometimes we'll get a fruit and a veg box. But then also we order our meat from the butcher. We have like loads of farms locally as well. So we are lucky that we have a farm that does raw milk that's close. And so, we're able to really anything we get from the supermarket is like really just filling in a very small gap. And I think we're trying as much as we're able to just move away a little bit. And I appreciate there's a fair amount of privilege there because some of these things come at a bit of a higher cost. But I think, you can find some little ways around, if you're not able to grow your own or you don't have your own dairy cow or, all of that sort of stuff. There are ways that you can sort of work around it.
Yes, I completely agree. We have an allotment too, and we don't currently have chickens, although they are on in the future. We're thinking of getting them again. But the way we do things is we trade things. So even though we don't have a large growing space, so we share the allotment with my dad, and he has made friends with other allotment people, and they grow things different to what we grow, and we can trade and swap and things like that. So that's a way of expanding our growing space really, and what the things we can grow.
Yeah, I love that. And I love sort of, like on allotments, you've got like such, people are generally quite helpful. Like my plot neighbours, one of my plot neighbours, he's always like giving me stuff. Like, and I never have, I'm still so early in my like allotment growing journey. And he'd be like, "Do you want all these broad beans?" And I'm like, "I've got nothing to give you except a weed." Like, can I interest you in a weed? So, but people are like, generally quite nice and giving if they've got too much.
Yes. I think as well we find things that we can grow and other people may not be able to. For example, I can grow cucumbers, but my parents struggle to, even though we live in the same area and things that I think we just our gardening styles may affect that. So that's good for swapping and trading and things. And again, it adds that extra bit to what we can have.
Yeah, it's funny. I up until this year, I have been woeful at growing cucumbers. Absolutely terrible. I would just kill them every time, and I was like, I'm not bothering anymore. And then this year, I was like, no, I'll have one more go. And I didn't do from seed. I actually bought like the plug plant for it,
Yeah.
which I've tried before, but I've also killed them as well. So, but this year I've got so many cucumbers, I don't know what to do with them, and I'm like, and it's weird that it happens like that. Like last year, I grew beetroot and leek so well, and I love beetroot and I love leek, and I was like so excited, like, oh, look, I can grow beetroot and leek so well. This year, they're not growing. I'm so sad because they're like my favorite. Like I love leek, and I'm like, so it's like last year, some of the things I was successful with last year, this year not so much. And the things that weren't good last year, I'm doing great this year, and I'm like, I don't think I understand gardening. But yeah, it's so much of it is just just trial and error, isn't it? And just finding out what works, especially with gardening. Like I did balcony gardening for the longest time, and it's a completely sort of different ecosystem up on a balcony than it is on an allotment. And so yeah, you don't have the benefits of many bugs up on the balcony. um Certainly don't get, I live on the third floor, so like there's no snails. Yeah, so I just think, yeah, so much of it is just sort of trial and error and just, figuring out what works for you, and then you're able to, just find out, what works best for your family really, aren't you? So I kind of feel like urban homesteading is actually more for me than actual homesteading. And it's funny because that's something I was always like, oh, I'm gonna buy land and I'm gonna like build a house, which is totally unaffordable, but I'm going to build a house and have chickens and cows and loads of space to grow my own stuff. But actually, I think like as time has gone on, I feel more like being in a more urban environment. But I'm very lucky. I live like right on the edge of a town within seconds to countryside, so it's like I feel like I've got the best of both worlds. But like I said, I don't really want chickens, and I don't think I really want to raise animals. So, like I said, embrace my local farms and their resources a bit more. But do you have any sort of tips or strategies for maximizing when you've got like limited space in urban areas to sort of create a productive and sustainable homestead?
Yes, definitely stick with things you absolutely love. So when I first started growing, I put things in. I just planted a lot of things because I just wanted to grow everything, and I just want that image that you see where it's all in photos of all these beautiful crops and everything like that. And I ended up, the things I was successful with weren't necessarily the things I enjoyed. So I had lots of kale. I hate kale. I can't stomach it in any way. And it took up so much space in my garden, and you think, why would I grow that? And so stick to things you love, definitely, and then you can put more time into researching how to look after them, making sure they've got the right environment and things like that. There's also a lot of smaller varieties, so like tumbling tomatoes. um my granddad used to have them on his balcony when he moved from a house to a flat when he got ill. And I have them now on in my garden as well as the ones in the greenhouse. And for such a small plant and that takes up so little space, they produce a decent crop. And then you can grow things underneath them as well. And same with strawberries, they can do really well in hanging baskets. And herbs and salads you can grow on the windowsill. um, and they grow quickly, and you can put more in as you harvest them, and so you get much longer, much more crop for the growing season. And then making your own products as well. I use white vinegar for most cleaning. I buy a big batch of it, and so my cleaning cupboard has white vinegar in, things like salt, essential oils, and it. So I don't have multi-surface cleaner. I don't have window cleaner. It's all in one, and I can just make whatever I need, and that doesn't take up much space in the home. So that's another thing when you think of homesteading, you think of garden space, but it's also indoor space. So that gives me room to store jars for preserving and things like that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about only growing things that you love, because I did the same thing, and I grew the most abundant crop last year of radishes, and I cannot stand radishes. I cannot stand them. I have never liked them. And it was almost just one of those things where I was like, well, I've heard they're quite easy to grow, and I wanted like the thrill of like, I'm growing something. But then I just ultimately returned them back to the compost heap, which that serves its purpose as well, like putting it back to the earth. We always say that if we have anything that maybe doesn't quite make it in our house, we're always like, we're going to return it to the earth, we're going to give it back to the compost heap and return it to the earth. So, but also you said about making products. I'm the same. I have like one sort of like white vinegar solution that I use, and I use it for everything. And it's I always like it's funny because sometimes on Instagram when I've like shared that I've like made something, people are like, oh, like I could never do that because it takes so much time. And I'm like, it doesn't though. It takes me like, once you've done it the first time, it's like minutes. Often
Yeah.
I will often be the one who like makes up the solution because I like know it off like the top of my head. So my husband will be like, oh, there's not much of the kitchen spray left, and I'm like, okay. And it like within literal minutes I'm like, right, it's done. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's I like it as well, not having like heavy chemicals around our house as well. I feel like the slow living movement and urban homesteading, or just homesteading in general, really goes hand in hand. So how do you balance the demands of urban living with like a slower pace, and the self-sufficiency of homesteading, and what benefits have you experienced?
Well, all of our family are involved in it, so we all have our own tasks. We all make our own things. My children are home educated, so they get a lot of learning through hands-on learning. So it's like we've got more of us that can do it. Do you know? There's not just me.
Yeah.
There's my husband and my three children, and we all have our own part to play in it, and we all have our own like my youngest likes making like the garden sprays. My daughter likes making like the lotions and potions, the more girly items. And
Yeah.
my eldest likes helping with whatever he can really, but he doesn't really like the dirty, like making things part of it. But he does like moving things and the heavy things and things like that. Um, and it's really helped us connect as a family, so we can really spend time together. There's not that rush, there's not that stress of having to go here, there, and everywhere. We can just do things at our own pace. We don't rush. So, and with the cleaning products and things, we don't need to think, oh, I need to rush to the shop and get this. We can just make it. And like you said, once we know how to do it, it takes minutes or if not seconds, depending on the item, and it saves money, and that also helps the stress levels, because money is one of them things a lot of people worry about. And it's just everything really. We're just but mainly the connection as a family we've got.
Yeah, I love that because you know, I'm going to home educate my children as well, and you know, I feel like it's this way of life that we're sort of all embracing. And you know, you know, my husband and I obviously lead in the way, but I like the fact that we get to raise our children that way, and that they see us, you know, taking time and, you know, resting where necessary and not having to rush. And, you know, my husband, he works luckily from home, and he's been home since the beginning of the pandemic, and he's home full time. And so, you know, it's nice. We're very lucky in that sense that even he doesn't have to rush. You know, he just has to start work for 9 o'clock, and it's everything just feels like at a much slower pace. And I like the idea that the children will see that as they grow, and hopefully they won't have to sort of unlearn like the rest of us had, that, you know, you don't have to be busy all the time, and it's not, you know, it's not being productive. Being busy doesn't necessarily equal being productive. And yeah, just hopefully they won't have to unlearn everything that we sort of had to unlearn as we went along, really. Um, so when it comes to thinking about yourself as an urban homesteader, what are the sort of first steps that people can take to get started? Or do you have any like ideas of resources or support systems or any of those sorts of things?
To get started, I think you need to really focus on what you want from your homestead. So, if your long goal is to have animals and things like that, start learning about them. Like start small, but start learning. Like we love animals, and we want to get chickens again and things. So we bought a mealworm farm, um, and that's it takes up less space than like a box on your desk. They are tiny for the starter packs, and that's something that you can learn about. And it feeds our koi and our tortoise and the gecko that we'll be getting and the chickens and things like that. And so it is a way of learning about things and keeping things without that needing that space. Um, and one of the things I did when we first started growing things was, because we don't have animals and I don't think I could slaughter animals for eating. So we in the summer we grow food for salad. In the winter we grow vegetables for soup. So I know I'm growing things right through the year that we can make a meal from without needing any animal products at all.
Yeah.
Even though we do buy them from the butchers and things like that, but it's just nice to know that we've made something ourselves that's completely that we've done completely ourselves, and it's really satisfying eating that, especially if we bake our own bread to go alongside it as well. um but start small. Like I said before, the first year I just planted everything. I got overwhelmed. I couldn't look after it all. I didn't know what I was doing. I treated all the plants the same, and I hardly got any crop. I think I got one single tomato, and out of all the tomatoes I planted, because I didn't pinch them, I didn't feed them enough, and things like that. And just think about your favourite herb and grow that on your windowsill as a starter.
Yeah.
or your favorite vegetable or something like that. Just research it, start small, and you can just get that satisfaction by putting basil into your food and knowing that you've grew that basil, and just start from there and slowly build up. And yes, radish, like you said, radishes are easy to grow, but if you don't like them, it's pointless, and it just uses up that space that you don't need to use. Resource wise, there's so many books available, but they all say the same thing in a different way, but a lot of that is available online now. So I have got a lot of self-sufficiency books and a lot of books about allotments and things like that. But then I could just type in my question into a search engine and I can just find the answer anyway. So again, it's that not spending money that you don't unnecessarily need to do um, when the resources are available for you, because there's plenty of online platforms now, like listening to podcasts and following people that have the in similar situations, and you can learn so much by them. It's not necessary to spend that money. And support wise, there's so many groups and like-minded people on different social media platforms. If you just search urban homestead or UK homestead and things like that, things come up and you can follow them, you can chat to each other, you can learn different things. And then if you've got a friend or a family member that's in a similar situation, so my dad doesn't, we share our allotment with him, and he lives very close by, and so we can chat, we can split seeds, or he'll buy some seeds, I'll buy others, and we can just share that cost. Um, and things that we use like spades and trowels. So he already had them, so I didn't need to buy them. And we can just share like hedge trimmers or whatever we've got, and it's just sharing and trading, and it's just that you just bring more people in, and you can really help each other out.
Yeah, I love I love all of that, you know, particularly about, you know, like there's so much online now that, like you say, you don't have to buy books that say the same thing in a slightly different way. Like there are so many people sharing stuff, there are blogs, there are podcasts. I mean, I think probably I have learned most from like free resources and free material or free stuff, that content that people create on blogs and Instagram, I would say, and just sort of like delving in further than that as well. And you know, yeah, just finding other people that do the same thing, because I know when I first like started thinking about my life, I was like, oh, I guess I'm kind of like a homesteader but in an urban environment. And then I was like, I must be an urban homesteader. And then I was like, and somebody has already coined that phrase. And there's me thinking like I was the inventor of urban homesteading, but no, I was not. But so, you know, you will automatically, I think, then, you know, in that situation, I was like, oh my gosh, there's loads more people out there. And, you know, then you end up finding, you know, other people, you know, you might start talking to them online, and yeah, there's just so much sort of available. And like you say, like just start really easy. I once saw a quote from like somebody, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a quote, but from somebody I follow who has like an actual homestead, and she was saying like, if your ultimate goal is to actually have a homestead where maybe you have chickens and, you know, grow your own food and etc etc, if that is your ultimate goal, or even if it isn't, but if that's your ultimate goal, then there's so much about homesteading that you can learn while you're waiting to get to that goal. So while you're waiting, you can learn how to like preserve your harvest, and you can learn how to do like canning and making jams and making sourdough, so that actually when you finally get your homestead, you can actually then focus on like, okay, now I need to learn how to raise chickens. And you know, so there is so much you can do even in the waiting period, I think, as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. So it'd be like getting 10 acres of land and just, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
You don't know what to plant, you don't know what animals to buy. Yeah, I completely agree. We start from where we are and we just take it as far as we want to or we can financially do. But we still get that contentment from whatever we decide to do, rather than thinking, oh, one day, or when I have the money to, or when this happens or this happens. There's just start now. There's no reason not to. Urban homesteading, I think, is getting and going to be more popular as people just pull away from that busy lifestyle. And like you said, since the pandemic, people have wanted to do that, and I think more things are available online as well, of people sharing how to do things. So it's definitely something that I think is going to be very popular.
Yeah, I agree. I think I see more of it now than ever. And, yeah, just starting where you are, because, like you say, you can start doing those things now. And actually that sort of brings like this sort of like element of like living in the present to the fore even more, because we're not constantly like, when I get land, when I get my own homestead, when I get chickens, when I get a cow, actually you can be like, I'm enjoying all of these things now, and all of that will come in time when I've got the resources or the money or whatever. So I think you're better able, if you're able to sort of like start where you're at, start slow, then you're able to enjoy it now, rather than it just being like a one day pipe dream that you may or may not do.
Yes.
So it's been so wonderful to talk to you about urban homesteading. It's one of my favorite topics, I must say. So I was like, when I was talking to my husband before this episode, I was like, oh, I'm talking about urban homesteading tonight. I'm so excited because it's my favorite topic. So
I was saying the same to my husband. I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can actually talk to someone who will listen about what I'm saying and who has the same ideas as I do.
So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing with us all your approaches to urban homesteading. Where can listeners connect with you online?
I'm on Instagram and my account is Heart Home Ed and Homestead.
That's fantastic. And I will link that as well in the notes, so everybody can just like click through and find you. So thank you again so much for coming on. It's been so wonderful to talk to you about urban homesteading, my favourite topic on earth.
Thank you for having me. I've absolutely loved it.
You're more than welcome. Oh, guys, that was just an amazing episode. I know, I say it every time, but like I said earlier in this episode, I am always so grateful that I get to speak to some amazing people and have some incredible conversations. And so I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. Don't forget to check out Kirsty. You can find her on Instagram at Heart Homed and Homestead, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram. You can find me there at Life on Plot 44. You can also follow the blog, which is theslowlivingcollective.com. So thank you guys so much again for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.